Check 1, 2. Loud. Pokemon trainers. Everywhere. I feel like people are looking at me. So today we're gonna do something that's a little bit different from what we normally do. So if you're looking for a typical weekly program, you might want to check one of our services in the past, or even check out what another church is doing online. But for us, we're gonna look at where we've come from, where we're going, and what I'm hoping is that this will answer some questions, not just immediate future questions, but big picture questions as well. So thanks for hanging with us. My name is Lou, and this is Community Church Online. So before we jump into things, of course, there's a few things that I gotta let you know. First is that if you're new, if this is your first week with us, we're really glad that you're hanging out with us. I think you've chosen an especially good week to check out what's going on at Community Church, but we would love it if you would go over to communitychurch.net/connect and fill out just a little form on there. And if you do that, just to say thanks, we'll send you a little gift card to a coffee shop in the mail. We're not gonna flood you with emails or snail mail or come knocking at your door, anything like that. We just love to know we have new people with us. So as many of you know, we've got programs for kids, young people of all ages. So if you go over to communitychurch.net/media, everything you need can be found there, and also over on our YouTube channel. So we've gotten some really good feedback from something called Today's Big Idea. And basically what that is something that you get when you download the app. You have to enable push notifications, and then in the morning you'll get a little verse that pops up on your phone, and if you tap on it, there'll be a little explanation, a big idea for you to think about for the day. So if you want that, make sure you download the app over at your favorite app store, and then you'll have it on your phone. So thanks again for joining us online. Like I said earlier, this week's gonna be a little bit different, but there's some really exciting news and some important information in this week's service. It's a little bit longer than normal, so you might even want to go over to YouTube and watch it in like a faster speed, or you can just sit back, relax, and watch it wherever you're watching it. Thanks for joining us. Can't wait to see you soon.
Walking around these walls, I thought by now they'd fall, but you have never failed me yet. Waiting for change to come, knowing the battle's won, for you have never failed me yet. Your promise still stands. Great is your faithfulness, faithfulness. I'm still in your hands. This is my confidence. You've never failed me yet. I know the night won't last. Your word will come to pass. My heart will sing your praise again. Jesus, you're still enough, so keep me within your love. My heart will sing your praise again. Your promise still stands. Great is your faithfulness, faithfulness. I'm still in your hands. This is my confidence. You never failed. Your promise still stands. Great is your faithfulness, faithfulness. I'm still in your hands. This is my confidence. You never failed. you do it again. I've seen you move the mountains, and I believe I'll see you do it again. You made a way where there was no way, and I believe I'll see you do it again. Your promise still stands. Great is your faithfulness, faithfulness. I'm still in your hands. This is my confidence. You never fail. Your promise still stands. Great is your faithfulness, faithfulness. I'm still in your hands. This is my confidence. You never fail me, yeah. And I never will forget. You never fail me, yeah.
Well, thanks for hanging out with us this week, or checking in with us, connecting, participating, being involved, whatever you want to say we've been doing for the past 5 or 6 months. I'm glad that you decided to do it today. This week is a great week to be with us, whether you're new or have been here for a really long time. And I know I've said that before, and those weeks, they have been really great weeks. But this week, I'm especially excited because we're going to break the script. We're going to do something a little different. Instead of having a typical kind of weekly program like we normally do, we're going to answer some big picture questions and some more immediate future questions as it pertains to community church and maybe even your involvement in community church. So if you've been with us, this will answer a lot of the questions that people have been asking. But if you haven't, this will help you get a bigger picture of really what we're all about. In some ways, I think this is more important than what we normally do on Sunday. It's kind of like a family meeting, right? But if you're not part of the family, it's not like you're awkwardly sitting in on a family meeting. It's like you get to learn more about the family by listening. So anyway, that's what we're doing. And here's kind of where I want to start, right? For a long time in my life, the issue for me with God was not whether or not he was real. It was whether or not he was good. I just believe that God was this angry, power-hungry dictator that just got to call the shots because he was bigger. He's big, I'm small. And he's like the bully on the playground, top of the slide. They get to say what everybody wants to do, has to do, because he's in charge, right? And so it's well, who really wants someone like that to exist? So I didn't even want to know if he was real. In fact, I kind of hoped one day I was going to meet some college professor who would come along and tell me I don't have to worry about God. And then I'd be okay, great. Now I have to worry about all this, moral, religious stuff. But you could probably figure things out, right? At some point, my mind changed. And what we found not too long after that was that those feelings that I had of God being this angry, power-hungry, rule-giving dictator, those are pretty common on Long Island. We started doing some research before we launched as a church and just started asking people hey, in one word, just describe the church, describe God, your impression of this whole thing, one word. And the words we got, almost none of them were even remotely positive. It was distant, angry, judgmental, formal, cold, impractical, unhelpful, just all these really, really negative terms. And that's really where this whole thing started. So we started asking this question, what if? What if? What if we started a church that existed simply to change the way that people think about God? To help them make this transition, because it's so common, this transition from feeling like he's this really distant, angry, powerful, judgmental force to somebody who cares deeply for us and genuinely wants us to thrive. Jesus explained it like symbolically in so many different ways. He was like, if you're hungry, like that deep ache you feel within you, like for something more, if that's a hunger, well, I'm the bread to that hunger. Like if you're thirsty, well, I am the living water to that thirst. If you feel like your soul is like tired, like it's just like weary, well, I'm rest for your soul. If you feel like you're in darkness, well, I'm the light to that dark. And he's basically just saying, I'm really like, this is what you've been looking for. This is what you were made for. And so we feel like, okay, like what if that was our single purpose, to change the way that people think about God? How would we do that? How do we do that? And the conclusion that we came to is, well, the easiest way to change the way that people think about God is to change the way that they think about the church. And the best way for us to get people to change the way they think about the church is to create a church for people who don't go to church. And so what we decided, what we hoped we would do, is to create a place where you would want, if you have a church background, this is the place you'd want to bring a friend. This is the place where you know whatever's happening from up front is not going to make you feel weird. Like you don't have to worry about the pastor or someone else on stage doing something that's going to make you cringe because you brought a friend into the building. We wanted to create a place that people could come in and just simply hear about how good God is. Honestly, our goal is that people will walk out feeling like, wow, he's better than I thought he was, or at least being open to the possibility that he's better than they thought he was. So really, that's our goal. It's all pretty much like that simple. Everything we do is toward that end. And so I'll give you like a few quick examples, like our environments. You probably noticed if you've been here in the building that the place where we meet didn't really have like a very church vibe. And the reason why is because for a lot of people on Long Island, for whatever reason, most of them don't have a favorable, like a positive view of church. And so in the same way, like you walk into McDonald's and right away it's a trigger, right? You start thinking, what am I going to eat? You start getting these feelings of hunger because that's what you do when you're in McDonald's. Well, if you've had a negative church experience and you walk into a church and it feels like the place where you had a negative experience, all of a sudden that's going to make you feel like feelings of resistance or negativity, or you're going to feel like you don't want to be there. So we're like, okay, let's make this a place where it doesn't feel so much like a church, a place that's a little bit more casual. Another issue that people have in the church is that they feel like the church wants something from them rather than something for them, specifically with money. People feel like the church is always trying to get money from them. And so if you were with us in person, you know that we've never once passed a plate. And the reason why is because we don't want to put a plate in someone's face and expect them to drop money into it, because that's one of the things that keeps people out of church. So we say all the time, we don't want you to feel any pressure to give. And we mean that. We don't want you to feel pressure to give. And so all these little things. The other thing, I mean, there's a bunch of things, but the last thing I'll mention is kids. A lot of people have not come to understand church as a place where they would want to bring their kids. But we believe that kids, they're the next generation, right? Any minute you spend investing in a child is worth hours investing in an adult. It's a season of life with disproportionate influence. And so we feel like, well, we have kids here. Rather than just like making them be quiet in their seats while we do like adult stuff, why don't we have fun and engaging environments for them, where they could feel like they're known by their teachers and that they have a place to belong, where they actually want to be. And not only that, we want it to be safe and we want it to look safe. So when parents are in here, they don't have to wonder who's walking around the kids area. So everything we do, we just install doors, like these locking doors on each side of our hallways, because we want parents to know, okay, my kids are locked away, they're safe, there's nothing I have to worry about. And it's all to create a church for people who don't go to church, to the end of changing the way that they think about God. And so if you rewind to before we launched, we asked the question, what if we tried to make a church for people who don't go to church in an ultimate effort to change the way that they think about God? And this is where the story starts to get crazy. This is where it starts to get weird almost. There are coincidences that we just can't even explain. This isn't a story that we could have written ourselves. And really, this is the reason why we wanted to include this in our weekly program. When we're teaching, right, our hope is to change the way people think about God, see how good he is, through the communication of information. But we can learn like one of two ways. We can learn from information or we can learn from experience. Like one author said that there's a difference between studying maps of the ocean and sailing the seas, right? It's two different types of knowledge, and you learn things in a very different way. And that's really what it's been like starting this church. We put a lot into what we do on stage and what we do on camera. But that's really no more than the transfer of information. We want to change the way that you think about God. We want you to continue to see how good he is by like explaining that and telling stories and doing stuff like this. We put a lot into it, and it means a lot to us. We value it highly. But we want to invite you into this story because there are things that you will learn that you cannot learn any other way than by joining in with us and being part of this community church story. And like I said, this is, for me, I have grown the most from doing this. This is my sailing the seas experience, and I think a lot of people on the team would tell you the same exact thing. We have seen God do things that we couldn't have ever have imagined. It started when Allie and I started talking about planting a church, and we knew back when we were in college that we wanted to do this, but we didn't know exactly when. And it had been years, really, since we had spoken about it. And one night, Allie and I were talking, and I said, I think we really need to start thinking about this again. The next day, literally the next day, randomly, out of the blue, I got an invitation to a pastor's meeting with a group of pastors called Revive Long Island, all about planting churches and where we need churches on Long Island. And so I was like, holy cow, what are the chances of that, right? Then that weekend, I was moving some stuff out of my grandfather's house in the town of Babylon, right, in the Babylon area. And I'm driving in front of my dad, and this was on my mind. I said, Dad, I really could see myself starting a church in the Babylon community. I love the people here. I love the way of life. I love the location. I would really love it. And he's like, oh, okay, that's interesting. Well, fast forward to the actual meeting, which was a month after I got the initial invitation. And we put a big map of Long Island up at the front of the room, and we're plotting all these points, like where there are churches, where there are a lot of churches, where there are little churches, where there are a lot of people, where there are little people. And what we found is that there are a lot of people and very few churches in the Babylon area. And the concluding thought from that meeting was a pastor, his name is Steve Tomlinson. He's standing in the front of the room, and he said, we need people to start churches in Babylon. And I was like, well, okay, that's kind of crazy, right? And that was just one thing. Then Allie and I get together, and we live together, so we're always together. But we start talking about music, and we're like, all right, if we're going to start a church, for people who don't go to church, we really need to have like a high level of music, quality level of music, because everybody can connect with music, and we need someone who knows what they're doing. And so we started to just pray, because like we figured we're doing this for God anyway. We want people to see that he's real. We should go to him and ask him for stuff when we need it. So we started to ask God, like, we're not musical. I don't know anything about music. Could you give us somebody that could make like music happen for us in a good way? And I started like thinking about musicians, and I knew of this guy named Tom Pryor. We had kind of crossed paths a few times. He was at the Stony School years ago. My sister knew him when she was a teenager. We weren't friends, but we kind of knew of each other, and I liked him. I liked his attitude. I liked his approach. I liked how relatable he was, and I loved what he did on stage, musically speaking. And so, don't tell him any of that. And so I like in my little journal, in my little desperate prayer for music, I write down like Tom Pryor, right? And that weekend, totally unrelated, I went to Pennsylvania. I went to a little conference, like a little conference for church leaders. And I go to the bathroom before the conference starts. And I'm at the urinal. And this is going to be too much information. But I look to my left at the urinal next to me, which you're not supposed to do, by the way. And I see Tom, like he's just standing right next to me. Like that weekend, I was like, oh my goodness. And I'm like in shock that he's just standing there next to me in Pennsylvania. And I'm looking at him, he starts to get really uncomfortable. This is definitely too much information. I'll probably like edit this out. And then he realizes I'm looking at him, and then he realizes it's me, and we start laughing or whatever. And I didn't tell him what I was thinking about, but I just kind of put him back in my mind. It's like, this is kind of a crazy coincidence. Long story short, he's around, right? You've probably seen him. Tom's on our team. That's something we just like couldn't have explained. We were also told when we were getting ready to start the church, like in our training, that we should expect the surrounding churches to react negatively to us because a lot of them don't like the idea of a new church coming into the area. And I can honestly tell you that there is not one pastor on Long Island that responded negatively to me telling them that we were going to start a church in Babylon. There's a pastor his name's Steve Tomlinson, pastor of Shelter Rock Church. They've got a few campuses. He's had me in both of those campuses and gave me the chance to tell people about the church. He encouraged people to go and help me. Pastor Josh Moody is at Three Village Church, which is where I had been for years before I left. And he stood there in the church and told his people that they should help, that they should support us, that they should leave his church and come help us start a church. The same thing happened at Centerpoint with Brian McMillan, who gave me the opportunity. He's just one town over in Massapequa. Well, it's one of his gazillion campuses. But he stood on stage and said, like, told his people, you should go help start this church. In fact, some of you are probably from there because you wanted to help Community's Church start because your pastor told you to come help us start. True North Community Church, Bert Crabb did the same thing. He gave me the chance to speak there and then told his people to go help us start this church. It was one church after the next that came alongside us to give us a boost to help us get off the ground. And it was totally the opposite of what we expected. But the craziest story of a relationship with the pastor was the pastor of the First Baptist Church of Babylon. His name was Wayne Griffiths. I was expecting from him more resistance from him than anybody else because I was setting up near him. But I wanted him to know that we're like part of the same mission, right? We're both trying to follow Jesus, both trying to like please God, right? And so I'm like kind of came in like, I come in peace, like can we be friends? And instead of pushing me away or reacting negatively, he went over the top to welcome me into this community. He told me I could come and do my office work in his building anytime I wanted to. So his building became the place where I started to do my work on a regular basis. Eventually, the two of us started meeting together and praying together for the Babylon area. And we started getting closer and closer. Eventually became a mentor to me. I started going to him for advice, asking him questions. He became a real friend to me. And then one day, he asked me if I would be interested in maybe renting the church building from him. It would help them, it would help us. And I said, really, we're trying to be very intentional about making this an experience, making the church a place for people who don't go to church. And so we really don't want the environment to feel too much like a church. And so this really isn't our vibe for the way that it is right now. And he asked me, he said, well, what would you do if you could do anything here in Babylon? And at that moment, I didn't really say too much. I didn't really know what to say. And I said, I'm not sure. I don't know. And then I went back to him the next day. And I only did this because I could trust him. And I felt like our relationship was at the point where I could be totally honest with him. He mentioned to me that he had been considering possibly retiring in the next several years. And I wouldn't have said this if he hadn't said this to me. But I told him, I said, listen, you asked me what I would do if I could do anything. And if I could do anything, I would ask you to close down First Baptist Church, to invite the remaining people in the congregation to join our launch team, to be like our volunteers. We are at that point, we had about 40 or 50 people on our launch team. We had a lot of momentum. We were getting some pretty good funding from some much larger churches, so things were looking like good for us. And I said, if you invited those people to join our team, I think it would be a really cool experience for them to see what it looks like for a church to start from scratch, and then hand over all of the assets to us, your property, the church building, everything. And if you take the momentum that we have, the fresh energy, and the location that you have on Main Street, I feel like we could do something really, really cool. And at that point, I was nervous. I expected him to just like reach back and slap me, but he didn't. He smiled, and he was excited about it. And at that point, we continued to meet together and pray about the possibility of this happening. And then he told me he wanted me to present it to his leadership, the elders of First Baptist Church. And I did, and they responded the same way, positively. And there was still a lot of logistical things that would have had to happen. There are a lot of people that would have to be convinced that it was a good idea. I went to one of my mentors and told him about this, and he said, someone who's been in a lot of church planting situations said this almost happens pretty often, but it almost never actually works because so many things have to work out. And so we said, okay, well, we'll just kind of put it on the back shelf. And then out of nowhere, on September 10th, actually a year ago this week, Wayne passed away of a heart attack. The pastor passed away of a heart attack. And it was heartbreaking for everybody involved, for me, for their congregation, for their family. It was sudden. And Allie and I felt like, okay, well, maybe we were here just to help this church through this transition, right? Like at that time, I was still working on building the church. I wasn't serving as a pastor anywhere. So maybe I could help. And I did the funeral, and I did the wake. And then we just kind of stepped back and said, okay, well, maybe it was just in my life for that season. And then the leadership board, the elder board, came back to me and they said, we knew Wayne was excited about this plan to give everything to Community Church, to start over and join in at Community Church. And we want to move forward with this. And so to make a long story short, they presented it to their congregation in a beautiful way. They invited them to join Community Church, and then they closed down First Baptist Church for good. And they handed us their property, their building. And when you look at how crazy it is, this is a story we could not have written ourselves. It's just unbelievable. Even right now, COVID-19, there's a pandemic, obviously. And a lot of people have come up to me and said, I feel so bad for you. Your situation is so unfortunate. You started a church, met for 10 weeks in person, and then closed down. That's so unfortunate. And I appreciate the sympathy. And absolutely, it seems unfortunate until you learn that our original plan was actually to launch in April of 2020. And in 2019, we decided, in about July or August of 2019, we decided we were going to bump it up to January of 2020. And if we hadn't done that, there would have been no Community Church. We wouldn't have had any weeks to meet in person. And I don't know. I don't know where I would be. I don't know where we would be. I don't know where this plan would be. And so it's like we were given 10 weeks that we weren't expecting to have at all. And so what I'm trying to show you is that what's happening behind the curtain is way more incredible than anything I could possibly tell you on stage. And we want to invite you in to the Community Church story. We want to give you the opportunity to be part of this. And this may not be for you. It's definitely not for everybody. But if you want to get in on this, if you want to be part of the team that makes this happen, we want to make that possible. Right now, a lot of people have been asking about reopening. Are you going to reopen? When are things going to reopen? And here's the situation, right? Our team was not trained to do church in COVID-19 world. There are a lot of positions we're not going to need anymore. There are a lot of volunteer roles that we are now going to need that we haven't had. There are a lot of people that were on the team before that can't be on the team. And I believe there are some people that want to be on the team that weren't on the team. And so we're all disjointed with the team. And not just that, but our location, like this room, the ceiling is low, it's dark, it's tight. When it's jam-packed in here, it just gets hot. Everyone's breathing everyone else's air. It is not a very COVID-friendly place. Not just that, but our hallway down here is super tight. And with people going both ways in between services, it's just not a great place, not a very COVID-friendly place to do church. And so if we were to just reopen, we would be doing it in a less than ideal place with a team that's kind of disjointed right now. Definitely doesn't have the momentum or the continuity that we had when we shut things down in person. So what's the alternative? Well, when I was in high school, I used to play football, and I was the backup quarterback, not really because I was any good, but because, I don't know, I guess because I was. Somehow it happened. So I remember every once in a while we'd run a play, and the play would work. And we'd get the ball way downfield, everyone would be really excited, and I would run to the sideline to get the next play from the coach. And when this happened, typically he would have a smile on his face, and so would I, and I'd look at him for the play, and he would say, run it again. Run it again. If it worked the first time, run it until it doesn't work. And so we're asking the question, what if we ran it again? What if we relaunched instead of reopening? And so what does that mean? It means if we reopen, we're in a tough position, but if we relaunch, we're actually in a great position. If you look at where we were in September of 2019 and compare that to where we are right now in September of 2020, as difficult as right now is, we are way further along now than we were then. So we'll continue everything online. We'll continue our community groups and stuff like that. But behind the scenes, we'll be doing the same thing that we were doing in September of 2019. We had two things that we were doing, really two goals. Our goals were to engage the community, right? The community, a lot of times, communities think that the church wants something from them. We want the community to know that we want something for them. We're not here to take, we're here to give. And so we spent months just doing that. We did something called the 12 Days of Christmas, which was something that we ran on Instagram and Facebook. And we had like maybe 100, 200 followers. But that thing, like, it took off. it took off, and it made a powerful statement to the community that we are here to give back to the community, to support local businesses, to be an asset to the village of Babylon. And this year, we're going to re-engage the community. We're going to run the 12 days of Christmas again, as well as doing some other things. We've talked about doing Christmas pictures, so while doing the other stuff we've been doing for the COVID-19 relief. But right now, we've got almost 1,000 followers on Instagram. And so last year, 12 Days of Christmas was great with just like a couple hundred. This year, we're going to invest more into it and do it even bigger with more followers and make an even more powerful statement that we are here to serve the community. So we're going to, one, re-engage the community. The second thing that we did last year was to build the team. And this year, we're going to rebuild the team. What does that mean? Well, it means that we're going to have new roles. We need people who can play positions that we didn't have to play before, because there's a lot of precautions that we're going to have to take here. We're going to also open the door to new people who want to be on the team. I know that there are people that saw what we did when we finally met in person that weren't part of the team the first time, but would like to be part of the team the second time around. If that's you, this is your opportunity to get in on the ground floor a second time. We're relaunching, and so we're rebuilding the team, and we want to invite you into doing that. Now, what that meant then was that, like, to rebuild the team, we had launch team meetings. So we'd get together, we'd talk a little bit about like our strategy, our values, while getting to know everybody and like kind of growing as a community. And we'll have meetings. But the thing last year that really brought our team together was when, like 2 weeks before launch day, we found out we were no longer meeting in the Freemason Lodge, and we were now meeting in the church building in the basement. And this was not ready. It was pretty crazy looking. When we got here, there were some leaks. The floor was all broken and cracked up. Everything needed to be painted. Some walls needed to be taken down. The roof needed to be, there was like a ton of things. And we had no time, not much time, but everybody came in and pitched in, and we radically transformed what this entire floor looked like. This surprise construction project had the ability to bring everybody together. So we're going to rebuild the team this year. What does that mean? It means we're going to have those little launch team meetings. They're going to be important. But we're also going to have a little construction project together. We're going to move upstairs. Right now, upstairs is great. It's very COVID friendly, meaning there are multiple ways to get in and out of that room. It's a large open space room. There are big windows. It's going to feel way more healthy, and the air is going to feel way more breathable. It's not going to feel so tight and squished. It's way more COVID friendly. But I told you, everything we do for a reason, right? It's part of our overall strategy, and we really don't want to be in a place that feels like a traditional church. Not because that's a bad thing, but because we're trying to create an environment for people who don't go to church. So we're going to transform that room. We have an architect. His name's Steve Serenero. He hates getting credit like this, but take that, Steve. He was a huge part of what we did the first time. He gives so much of his time and energy, just phenomenal, to like a huge part of making this work. And he's helping us come up with the plan upstairs that's going to look great, but one that we can execute ourselves. And then the plan will be to launch exactly almost 1 year from the first time we launched. We're going to relaunch on January 3rd, 2021, upstairs. Now, what that means is I don't know exactly what the requirements are going to be at that point. We're probably not going to be able to fit as many people up there with the new regulations, but we'll have probably multiple services, and we'll also be live streaming the service online. So if you're not comfortable being there in person yet, that's totally fine. You could still join in and be part of this launch live on Long Island and online. So here's where we go from here, right? There's really a couple routes you could take. First, we want you to, if you want to be part of this, we really want you to commit to praying. The first time around, we had a log where people would go and they would spend like 2 minutes just praying for the people of Babylon and for this church, that we would have what we need to get this thing off the ground so we could change the way people think about God. Not so we could have a cool church, but so we can accomplish our mission. And people would commit to praying. Some people would pray for like 2 minutes. Some people pray for like 2 hours. And then they would go onto our website and they would just put in the amount of minutes that they prayed. And it would put it into this big graph. And it would just like tally up all the minutes. And it was cool at the end to be able to look back and say, look how many hours people spent asking God to do something unbelievable here for the people in Babylon. The second thing that we want you to consider is joining. If you want to be part of this launch team, what we're going to start doing is meeting in person here. Our first meeting is going to be September 27th. Now, what you have to do if you want to be part of that meeting is register online, because there are obviously very strict regulations that we have to and want to adhere to if we're going to be doing this. So you go online and register. And here's what the meeting looks like. This is important. The first meeting is going to be just like a get to know you, just everybody hang out, seeing like, hey, here's what the team looks like. Great, hooray, hurrah, fantastic. It'll be maybe like 90 minutes max, then everyone goes home. After that, the next meetings after that will be short little like pep talks with a song, some kind of like little team rally like we called them when we were doing it here. And then they'll be like, for the remaining time, we'll actually just be working, like knocking out this construction project. And you, if you're on the team the first time, you know the deep sense of satisfaction that you get on launch day when you look back and go, I did that. That wall over there is that color because I put a paintbrush to it. I painted that water fountain blue, and it's a really, really rewarding experience. So if you want to be part of the team that transforms, or if you want to be part of the team and you want to come, but maybe you're not in the condition you need to be to do like manual labor, and you're still welcome to be at that meeting, but you have to register for the team. So to do that and to find out more information about the calendar, the events, the team actually being the hands and feet that make this happen, you can go to communitychurch.net/team, and all the information will be on there. The other thing you can do is give financially. Now, I told you we are not a place that like pressures people to give, and I'm not going to pressure you to give. If you don't want to, I don't want you to feel like you have to. But if you want to help us make this dream come true, if you want to be part of like Community Church Launch 2.0 relaunch, we need money to do it. We need to buy paint. We're not like paying tons of people to come in and do stuff. We're doing it ourselves, but we still need to be able to buy supplies. And I've said this before, everything that we do is done because of the generosity of people. So what I would ask you to do, if you're open to this, is maybe just take a few minutes to pray and consider giving to the church to make this happen. And if it's not for you, if you're not in a position to do that, again, there's no pressure to do that. But I would be lying to you if I didn't tell you that we need money to pull this off. The last thing that I want you to do, if you're like not into this, or you're skeptical, or you don't have time, or you're not sure, I just want you to sit back and watch. Not like saying like, hey, watch what we're able to pull off, but watch the way that God is writing the story of Community Church. Not for the sake of Community Church, not for the sake of starting something for us, but for the sake of changing the way that people think about God. I told you before, and hopefully you've heard, but this is not a story we could possibly take credit for. We would not have written it this way. We could not have written it this way. And it's amazing to see what God has accomplished, not because of us, but often in spite of us. And my hope, ultimately, at the end of the day, is that you'll see that there is a God who loves you, who cares about you, who gave everything for you. And the more clearly we see him, the more we'll understand that he is infinitely better than we could ever imagine.
I seen you